Hey, quarantine hotel last day. What's up? It's a culture detective here investigating your favorite movies. And today I'm going to be doing my second review of the day. And that would be the art house classic film Suna no Onna, or Woman in the Dunes, directed by Teshigara Hiroshi, and it is adapted from a novel by Abe Kobo. So yeah, 99% of my subscribers have probably never even heard of this film before, and that's okay. And I've been thinking about whether I should review a movie like this or not, because I know if I do reviews on recent movies, I would get a lot of views. If I do movie reviews on classic movies like Mean Girls or Akira, I would get a lot of views. But if I do reviews on like movies like this, nobody's gonna click on this video. But screw it. I love talking about movies, so if I want to talk about it, I will talk about it. I don't care how many views this review gets. I don't care. I just want to talk about it, and that's the whole video. It's for me, okay? But if you're watching this video because you know about this film and you like this film, well, let's talk about this film. So, Woman in the Dunes is a movie that, obviously every single movie that I have watched and I'm watching and that I will watch are movies that are on my watch list for a very long time already. And same goes for Woman in the Dunes, which has gained a pretty heavy reputation as one of Japan's finest psychological dramas in the history of Japanese cinema. So obviously I got interested and I decided to watch it. And essentially it is about a school teacher, who likes to collect insects. And he goes to a desert in Japan, right? And he was collecting insects. He was contemplating about his divorce. And then suddenly he was reminded that the last bus is gone and he's stuck in the desert. He needs a place to stay. So the villagers brought him to a pretty shady, weird place, a hut, a very small wooden hut inside a pit of sand, inside a sand pit. And he has to go there with a rope ladder. And so he lived there for one night, and then the next morning, the rope is gone. The rope ladder is gone. He is trapped. He's been tricked and he's been held captive. And that is basically the movie. First of all, I'd like to say that the camera angles and the camera movements of this film is really ahead of its time. I wouldn't say they're the most crazy, fancy thing ever. Obviously, Hollywood blockbuster movies nowadays have crazier, fancier camera angles and movements. But given that this movie is made in the 1960s, with camera angles and movements like this, it is already really friggin' impressive. One shot that made me go, ooh, how did they even film that, was when the main character was descending the rope ladder and then the camera's following him, but the camera's not shaky, so it's not like there's another ladder at the side and the cameraman's just going down and it's like, oh. It's not like that. They must have built some sort of contraption to pull the entire camera down and then pull it back up. They must build something like this. There are also a lot of extreme close-ups in this movie that I didn't expect a film from the 1960s would have. Like, not only would they have close-up of the face, but also an extreme close-up of the eye, and like this part of the face, and like the neck. So whenever the characters are sweating, and you really see like the sweat coming out of their skin pores, and like sand on it, and it's just so intense. So that's really interesting. And then the editing of this film is also really good. I really love the rhythm of the film. It just feels really mature. It just feels really ahead of its time. This is one of the most ahead of its time films I've ever watched. And I really love the dissolves. Like sometimes we'd have a close-up of the eye and then it would dissolve into like these sand patterns in the desert. And it's a really beautiful wide shot. So very nice. Very, very nice. Now plot-wise, this movie is actually not that inaccessible. Going into this film, I thought this would be a very inaccessible, abstract, artsy movie. But no, right off the bat, we already have a very interesting premise. A school teacher gets kidnapped, and he wants to escape. That's the plot. And we kind of root for the guy, but we also see him like deteriorate mentally and psychologically. And I was kind of impressed because this movie is made before Persona, which is made in 1966. So it was like, wow, you know, a psychological drama like this coming out of Japan before Persona, that's amazing. Because when it comes to psychological dramas and psychological thrillers, there are films before Persona and then there are films after Persona. But this one came up before, and that's really impressive. And yeah, I guess given that this film is 2.5 hours long, it does get kind of slow in the middle, and I did get a little bored in the middle. I have to admit, just a little. And partially it's because it was late at night and I was really sleepy. But legitimately speaking, it does slow down a lot in the middle, and especially given that the film is mainly the main character and the woman in the dunes speaking to each other in one location. Of course, it does slow down and get boring, but I think ultimately the message of the film is really fascinating. It really gets me thinking, because this film was about adapting and living alone, which is something that I can kind of relate to, unfortunately. What I love about watching movies in general is that like sometimes you would watch a movie and then something, you find something relatable about it for some reason. So in this movie, her main character gets stuck in a small room and is basically held captive. I mean, look where I'm at now. I'm at a quarantine hotel, and I've been stuck for like 6 days, 7 days now. And, you know, I can kind of relate to that. But in a grander scheme of things, back in 2020 and 2021, when the pandemic happened and I had to quarantine and stay at home, it was also kind of like that. Just living alone and sort of feeling trapped at first, but slowly but surely, as time goes by, starting to feel comfortable with my own environment. Yes, I don't have to go to school anymore. I don't go out anymore all that much. I'm stuck in my own place, but I need to learn to find comfort in that and learn to adapt to that and be okay with that. And that's something I can relate to. And also, ingeniously, this movie is about work. And I don't know a lot of films about work, but that sounds like a really cool concept to explore. This movie is about work. It's about labor. Because essentially what happens is that one of the reasons why the man is held captive is because the man needs to help the woman shovel sand into buckets, and then the villagers will, you know, pull these buckets of sand and then sell it to a concrete factory. And as for return, the villagers will provide the woman and the man some rations, because according to the Japanese government, if there's a man and a woman in a house, they have to be provided rations if they are really that poor. So that's just how the whole system works. I do things for you, I provide you sand, and you provide me some stuff. I survive in order to work for you, and it's just like a loop system, essentially. And it's interesting, because I've never really thought about work that way before. I do things for you, I provide you service, you give me money, I use that money to purchase service for myself or purchase food so that I survive, so that I give you service again. It's one loop system. And at one point the movie even like slows down, and the main character basically says like, are we shoveling sand to live, or are we living to shovel sand? So that's really interesting. And because this movie is a critique on work and the meaning of work, it also critiques the meaning of life. Are we living to work, or are we working to live? So yeah, it's a pretty bleak and eerie film, actually, especially with the atmosphere. It's really creepy. There's one scene in the climax of the movie where a bunch of villagers went to that pit and threatened or tried to force the man to, you know, have sex with the woman in front of them. And that was like a really distressing scene for me. Yeah, this movie is basically a Black Mirror episode, but without the sci-fi elements in a way. I guess that's one way to sell this movie. But really, as a film coming out of the 1960s, this is so ahead of its time. And it's so brilliant in what it's trying to say. And I love the ending, because it's kind of a bittersweet ending, but also kind of an ending where you watch it and you're like, oh my god, what? And then it just ends, and it's like, damn. And of course, this review isn't complete without me talking about the amazing score by Takemitsu Toru, one of the greatest film composers of all times, full stop. He composed the score to Kwaidan, which is a film I reviewed recently as well, and also other classics like Dan and The Face of Another, also by the same filmmaker, Harakiri, Samurai Rebellion, Human Condition Trilogy. He worked with Kurosawa Akira many times on Dreams and Kagemusha. So he's got a lot going on. He's a fantastic composer. I love how eerie and avant-garde the score is. And yeah, just gonna leave it at that. Feeling a strong 9 on this movie. Maybe it would be a 10 after a rewatch, but I'm gonna leave it at a strong 9 for now. So have you watched Suna no Onna from 1 to 10, which is rated like and subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. I'd like to say that originally I actually wanted to watch The Face of Another first, but I was kind of worried that I wouldn't enjoy Face of Another. So I decided to watch this first as like a starter, you know. So there's that.